Power Athlete Nation.
What's happening?
Am I on key? Is that what it's called? Am I when you're on tone? Key? Tone?
Ketones?
Ketones?
Is that what we're going to get into today?
No, text. That's nonsense. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. Our featured friend of the podcast over here, John Welbourn, is just nodding. Would you say your nod? Yes. That's right, people. We are here with another crew episode. What's so funny over there?
I'm just laughing.
Funny man. Tell me a joke.
At how hard you guys are trying to get me to say.
What?
We can do this all day, John.
Yeah.
Reminded me of
Wayne's World quote, a sphincter
says what?
What?
I don't get it.
Oh, you want me to keep saying sphincter says what? To make me seem stupid. And they're like, remember at the Rob Lowe one? They're like, he's very smart. Me very stupid.
Bows away.
Yeah, he's like, it's a lot of great. Whatever happened to Mike Myers?
I think he's crushing it. Just doing his thing.
Shrek, he made $1 billion and then
he had and then he's like done cameos.
Yeah, he was in the Queen movie.
Yeah. Good for him.
For sure.
The guy's genius.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the tequila.
Kid Married to Axe Murder.
Yeah.
I was just going there. I remember. I'd have to rewatch that because I remember it being like roll on the floor, laughing, funny.
Oh, it's still that funny.
Okay, all right. I mean, when's the last time I've ever threw your movie advice into the trash and walked away? Was it maybe Vision Quest? And that turned out pretty shitty on my part. So Mike Myers is back in. Maybe we'll do this Friday movie rec.
We've got a lot.
I know.
If our listeners were not aware, on Fridays we drop movie recommendations from the crew,
and we watch that movie on the weekend.
And
That's
then
right.
we discuss.
But that's not what this one's about. We're not talking movies today, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to another crew episode of Power Athlete Radio, a top fitness podcast on iTunes. I bet you didn't know that. And if you didn't, that means you probably haven't reviewed us or rated this podcast, which you should. Rate it and tell your friends about it. Today we're taking a call. A voicemail's hit the hotline. Hotline is hot and the hotline is open. That number to the hotline is 929-464-4640. That's 929-ING-0. You can call us, leave us a message on anything you want. We've been fielding some training, nutrition, a little bit of like movie and entertainment.
And a lot of life. Mm-hmm. A lot of advice.
Yeah, we're looking to give life advice. If you're looking to lease a car, call us and ask us, and we'll tell you what car to lease or buy or not buy. Tanner.
Well, especially if you're into piece of shit 80s pickup trucks. I've found that like now people are like texting me pictures. Hey, should I buy this? And my usual thing is no. Don't do it.
Here's what you need to look for.
Because they're addictive. Mm-hmm. Once you get one, next thing you know, they're like gremlins. They get wet and they just multiply. Next thing you know, you end up with a dozen of these things.
Mm-hmm. If you want to know more, call us and ask us. Leave us a voice message. We've gave this advice because we were starting to get some like 3-4 minute voicemails. We don't want to know that much.
Thanks, Tim Wacker.
So yeah, but Tim's a great guy. Tim's one of our guys, longtime guy,
longtime listener, longtime caller.
Yeah, and longtime message leaver. But he's now changed his ways. He's called us and told us that he will be succinct from now on.
In a 3-minute voicemail.
Yeah, I was going to say like that voicemail was kind of long that he apologized on.
You know, if that would be. Tim, that would have been fantastic, buddy. Like
if he just called to apologize and didn't
two-part 3-minute voicemail about being brief. The
brevity is not my thing.
Well, El Deuterino, if you're not in the whole brevity thing. Okay, so the voicemail's open. Call us, leave us a message, and we'll get to it. Like today, so we have Shirley. Don't call me Shirley.
Surely you can't be serious.
I'm not kidding, and don't call me Shirley, which would be airplane.
That's right. Shirley is calling, asking us a little bit about some TRT with over 40 athletes, which that term I think is a lowercase a athlete. But let's see what Shirley has to say, and then we'll get into it.
Hey guys, this is Shirley. I'm calling to get your thoughts on testosterone replacement therapy for the over 40 athlete. Given multiple iterations of blood work showing low T, even with good sleep, dieting, and lifting dialed in. Thanks. Look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Shirley. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling. And thanks to all the listeners who call as well and aren't calling, but are just listening. And if you're not listening, I don't like you. The question has to, let's make some assumptions. So he says he's training.
What's he doing for his training?
Let's assume he's following our stuff.
Okay.
He says nutrition.
Well,
let's assume he's within the guardrails.
We're going to have to assume a lot here.
Right. Why don't we say, okay.
Well, let's just start with the testing piece first.
Okay, go.
So he says there's several iterations of blood testing. The blood testing is just going to give you a one snapshot in time. So I think what happens with blood testing, and people think that it's kind of this panacea, it's going to fix everything. What it's doing is it's showing you a snapshot in time at which they drew that blood. For the blood testing to be really accurate, you have to have a longer kind of iteration saying, hey, I did this testing every 2-3 weeks for over the course of a couple months, and it's historically low. Now, the problem is if you're just doing like, he didn't say if he was doing total test, free test, what necessarily what testing he was doing, but I bet he's not doing any micronutrient testing. A lot of times we've seen with people that have low T isn't necessarily for anything other than the fact that they're having inflammation in the gut or they're low in something, and there's certain key micronutrients that you need to convert for testosterone. One is zinc, magnesium, and iron. If you're low in selenium and other key micronutrients, it's going to be next to impossible for you to be able to efficiently make a lot of testosterone. The other thing that could be relating is even if his total testosterone was pretty good, if all of a sudden sex-binding globulin hormone gets elevated and produced through the liver, if that's elevated, it's going to gobble up and block all your free testosterone. So he doesn't say if it's total test or free test, so we're going to have to take an assumption that maybe they're doing both values. So the first one I would look at is micronutrient testing. Send him to somebody like a Dr. Tom and let him do a full micronutrient panel and figure out why he's low in these micronutrients and if he is. The other one's going to come, and he said even though his sleep is dialed, has he actually had a sleep study? If he has sleep apnea, or even if it looks good, poor sleep and the inflammation associated with crappy sleep can all of a sudden create high levels of cortisol, and cortisol and testosterone play in the same plane. So when cortisol high, it's very hard to get a higher testosterone. So that would be a key factor. We don't know what he's doing for his training. He might be severely overtrained.
We have Grindstone. So
he's
identifying the individual, he is currently on Grindstone programming.
So probably he's lifting heavy weights 2 days a week. He's probably backfilling. So I would bet you he's in that. So once we'd kind of exhausted all that, we'd looked at the micronutrient testing, we looked at the training, we looked at the sleep.
What about stress from work? Let's just say this dude is, I don't know. Let's say he's like 60, 70 hours a week running his own business and is like stressed out.
Dude, stress is another key factor for testosterone. Family's another one. It can be as simple as when I was, 18 years old, I got kicked in the balls and now I have some form of like issue where I have some testicular damage and now it's not converting.
I'm sorry to hear about that, John.
As you guys know, women produce small amounts of testosterone in their adrenals. Guys produce 10% of their testosterone in adrenals. 90% of the testosterone is produced in the testes. So if there was damage to the testes. So after we'd looked at that, I would look at some more kind of edge of the peripheral ways to see if we could maximize testosterone before you went actually on replacement. One of those things, in terms of a supplement, the only one that I've ever seen have a positive impact on testosterone levels is Dr. Tom Cosenta's Renew Male. I thought the research on that one was off the charts. But also a prescription drug that's called Clomid. Pretty interesting. What it does is it actually stimulates the testes in such a way that if there's an issue there, and I read a research not too long ago that showed that I want to say it was like a 4-day a week. So it was like a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday dose of Clomid ramped up your production of natural testosterone as a way to stimulate the testes. And I would have to go and pull up my computer to actually look at the pathway in which it works. But there's some key facts like that. If you decide after maybe, and I've also seen people do some really jiggy stuff where they cycle on they do some cycles of HCG to try to get their testes kind of stimulated and get them back and help in that. Now,
do you think also, John, let's say someone's like, oh, my nutrition's dialed in, right? And let's say it is. Do you think they also mean like alcohol consumption?
Alcohol consumption can kill testosterone levels. Mm-hmm. So I remember Dr. Tom and I had a funny conversation. He said that he's had clients that are like, hey, I want to go on testosterone replacement. How do I ensure that my testosterone levels are low when I get tested? He said, 1, heavy night of drinking, get less than 4 hours of sleep. If you stay up drinking till 2 a.m. and the test is at 6 and you get 4 hours of sleep after a night of drinking, your testosterone levels will absolutely be in the toilet. And so, I mean, and this is where things get dangerous with that idea of like, hey, I got this one snapshot on time. What if you had a really poor sleep? What if you got woken up? What if you had a bad meal? I mean, there's a lot of things. So what you have to do is you have to look at this stuff over the course of time to, kind of start seeing like what the numbers. And I think what happens, a lot of doctors, especially with the testosterone replacement and the HRT stuff, they have these kind of weekend deal. The doctor goes and learns about it, and hormone therapy and a lot of that stuff isn't necessarily common practice. So these guys learn it's kind of a 1-to-1. You test the guy, he's low. Let me give him and write him this prescription, and they either do some form of injectable or it looks like a testosterone cream. And the problem with that is they give you this drug, and then what's the follow-up look like? So you guys have heard me talk on the podcast that my dad had prostate cancer. They removed his prostate. He went in and his testosterone levels were actually super low, as they should be if you get your prostate removed. And they prescribed him testosterone cream. So he uses the cream, and all of a sudden he ended up having some TIAs and started, had these kind of little mini strokes. And I ended up taking him to Dr. Tom. The first time they tested him, he had no testosterone in his body. So all the testosterone was aromatizing to estrogen. Estrogen was super high. So the doctor wrote him a prescription, told him how to use it, and never brought him back to retest him to actually see if the testosterone was working. Because if he had, he'd be like, are you using this every day? You have no testosterone in your system, but your estrogen's through the roof. So they probably would have been better off prescribing him something like a Arimidex or, something like a Clomid or something to stimulate natural production and tend to block estrogen. And he probably would have been healthier and lived a lot longer if he had not gone down that road. So my big thing with anything that looks like hormone replacement is, that's for you and the doctor to decide, but make sure that you have a doctor who is well-versed, intelligent, and knows this stuff, just not some fucking, guy in a strip mall that's like, oh yeah, I'll write you a script for whatever you want, and then not giving any guidance and not bringing you back to do some regular testing so that not only are you able to fine-tune the amount, because the problem is, if the testosterone level is way too high, it's going to basically throw your hypothalamus axis out of sync, and your body's going to not be able to discern between exogenous and endogenous testosterone. It just knows it has too much. So what it does is it turns off its natural production, and it'll start balancing, trying to push the estrogen up. So being able to go in and figure out, okay, if the guy wrote me a script for 150 milligrams, what does that 150 milligrams get me? And what is my estrogen, and what do the other hormones around it look like?
So that would be in terms of screening and trying to select a doc who's well-versed in this. It would be like, that would be a potential question is, number one, what's your testing protocol to determine whether or not I'm a candidate? And number two, if I am a candidate, what's your testing protocol to determine whether or not we're accurately dosed?
Yes.
And if that doctor doesn't say something along the lines of, well, we need to evaluate a 20-day window. Is that, or like 10-day or?
No, I mean, it could be a 30-day, 6-week. I would probably look and say, at most a month or even 2 months. Like the first month you're on it, 30 days out, I'd be interested to see what the value is. And then, another 30 days, see the value. And at that point, you might push it out to 6 or 8 weeks. And
then leading up to that, is it the same type of cadence? Like test 2 times 30 days apart to determine? Or is it something like test?
Well, so I think what happens is that people see a low value, and it's just easier to do the prescription than it is to kind of do the detective work. Okay, hey, if we did a bunch of micronutrient testing and figured out that you were low in all these nutrients, not because you hadn't been eating it, because there was maybe some low-level gut inflammation or even some, low-level, high-level gut inflammation. Now, all of a sudden, you're like, man, I got some systemic inflammation in the body that's blocking receptor sites for my body to absorb these nutrients in the gut. Now, all of a sudden, I'm addressing a bigger problem opposed from just band-aiding the problem. So I'm a big believer in, if something is off or something is wrong, I want to know why, not just what the band-aid fix is. And then if we fix everything and it's still low, all right, now I'm healthier. Now we can start looking, but that has to be done intelligent, or you'll end up in a situation like my dad. The problem that he ran into is the doctor gave him the testosterone. His body fat was too high. And so when body fat's high, your body aromatizes the estrogen much quicker. So he was getting that testosterone aromatized to estrogen. Estrogen goes through the roof, and next thing you know, the blood clots and gets thick, and he ended up having problems associated with that.
Is there an age you can expect testosterone just to not be salvageable, or is 40 you still should be a regular functioning?
No, I mean, you should still be functioning pretty good.
My suspicion it'd be like Keith Barr's metabolic health. I bet you it has to do more with your metabolic health than necessarily your chronological age.
So like testosterone is a sign that there's some metabolic issue that you can focus on or find.
Could be.
Some people just have low T. I mean, it's, I wrote an article years ago that talked about assholes are just people with low testosterone. And I feel bad.
Right.
And I feel bad for them. There is some very, very real, physiological things. I mean, you figure, who was it? I want to say years ago, Dr. Tom did a study on a bunch of football players. And found that every one of them came in complaining of low T, like feel tired, whatever. All their testosterone was fine. It was actually their growth hormone was off because the impacts of the head was disrupting the hypothalamus axis. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I feel tired, I feel lethargic, and they think that, hey, this testosterone shot's going to be like a shot of adrenaline. And it's not necessarily like that. I would say, and this is the game plan I give, and you guys will get the inside scoop on the thing whenever I do private coaching, and I get hit up quite often. And if you guys are interested in this, you can go to, johnwelbourn.com and send me a consult. And I do this quite often with guys. The big thing I do is, what does the testing look like? Who's doing the testing? What are we testing? And then here's a recommendation of what I think you should get done. Based off of this, we can make small tweaks and changes, get retested. And if it doesn't change, then I'll give you, the cause to Dr. Tom, Dr. Kirk Parsley, the people that I work with and I know that are really jiggy with this shit. This is the game plan that I would like for you to discuss with your doctor as vetted by the smartest dudes on the planet for this stuff. And what we've seen over the course of 10 plus years working with, hundreds of clients on how to effectively get this done and what the testing protocols get like, and from those numbers, you can start making real decisions. Like if all of a sudden, hey, a CCA test at 200 milligrams, all of a sudden gets me to 1,500, 2,000 over, then that's probably a little too high. And Dr. Parsley coined a term, super physiological, which is not what you necessarily want. Because when that happens, you start having some problems.
Yeah, it rebounds, right?
Yeah, you get a rebound effect.
You get the things are put into motion to find equilibrium.
Yeah. So you always want to keep things in balance. And, there's things to look at, like there's DHT levels. Like for me personally, just a little history, when I get my blood work done, the DHT is through the roof. So like I think naturally I produce 7 times the amount of DHT that other people do. So DHT is associated with prostate issues and hair loss. So prostate and hair loss. What's crazy is my prostate numbers are like 0.1, and then I also don't have no hair loss, so it doesn't affect me. Like it's something physiological. And I remember Dr. Tom testing me over the years. He's like, your DHT's through the roof, which would make sense why you were, physiologically able to do your job and associate DHT with aggression. So he's like, it's probably why you were probably more aggressive and a little more violent than other people with the DHT, but he goes, it didn't have a negative impact. Mm-hmm. So now, I take a bunch of like supplements and kind of herbs and everything, not herbs, but like, I don't know, like whatever Dr. Tom puts in the supplements. That is one of them is kind of a saw palmetto that does some blocking of DHT. So that's just something I address because even though it doesn't affect me, being 40 plus and having 7 times the normal level of DHT doesn't make sense over the course of time. Right.
But you also know from like longitudinally from your blood work in your mid 20s over the past 20 years, I guess, right? Like
so
that Tom, you've had this elevated level and now it's time to like maybe titrate that down. Yeah, it's not like a crash either.
So I have blood work when I met Tom in 01, maybe. So I have every 6 months for the last 18, 19 years, we have blood work. So what he's able to do is aggregate all this information and kind of see where these things are. What does blood sugar look like? This hasn't changed. And then that's how we make the kind of the changes. But I am not opposed to it. And I always tell Tom whenever I get my blood work done.
The TRT stuff?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. Whenever I tell Tom, whenever I get my blood work done, I'm like, well, tell me when. Yeah. Like I'm not opposed to it. But and his thing is if your body's working well, testosterone looks good, everything's healthy, then just avoid it until it doesn't, and then use that as kind of the last resort. But there's a lot of levers that we can pull before then. And I'm always like, man, tell me when. Yeah. And that's a very real deal, but also I think the reason they kind of pick 40 is most guys, right, are, have already had their kids. They're in kind of a different phase of their life. If you're thinking like, oh, I'd like to potentially have another baby, or I would like to get my wife pregnant, what'll happen is if you go on testosterone replacement, it'll retard your body's natural production, which will kind of kill your sperm count. So it's kind of hard for dudes to have a big sperm count on, if they're trying to have children when they're on some form of testosterone replacement. So it depends on where you are within the cycle of your life and what kind of things you're doing. But I would personally check all those boxes instead of just being like, well, the doctor said I got low T, I guess I'm going to take this stuff.
Yeah.
In your article, talk to me, Johnny, low testosterone, cortisol, and CrossFit from October 2016, and you're almost answering a very similar question.
Yeah. I mean, the stance hasn't changed. I mean, this, what I do in the private coaching when people hit me up is we usually do a consult, and I help them kind of work through this and kind of figure out their training and try to, dial these things in and give them some good ideas and, put a protocol together that not only looks like diet, but also looks like training, what they're doing for sleeping. I recommend, especially guys in their 40s, if they're having something, even though they say their sleep style, something like CPAP makes a huge difference. There's also some other stuff, some other secrets that we can kind of throw out there. But I really think that there is an interesting protocol. And if you're implementing it and you're testing it, you're eating for micronutrients and trying to figure out like, hey, what does this balance look like? I think we can make some real gains. And then if you don't, there's always that final step. And then there's some other levels like I talked about with like the Clomid, HCG, and some other things that you can do before we get in that. But I think what happens with a lot of this stuff is people don't go into it with a plan. The doctor makes it, prescribes it, you start taking it, and then then what?
Right.
Like there is no okay, what does it look like a year from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Am I just going to stay on this? Do I know what these dosages are looking like? Is it helping me? What is the other blood work like that? Is it helping?
Yeah. This is my life now. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be. Or maybe it could be. It just, you have to go informed. And it sounds like there's a kind of a base level of information that you should probably know before going into this point. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it just could be more prudent ways to improve quality of life. Because I would bet that a dude, for the most part, or maybe not, I don't know. Let's say you go in and you say, you're reported like, oh, low T, how do you feel though? And you're like, I'm still tearing it up. I'm in my prime, baby. My training's great. My sleep is great. My mood is great. I
wonder if that's psychological. Guys go get their blood work
and
done.
then all of a sudden, right?
Oh, your T's low, and then next thing it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, because if you're still performing, and I guess we use that term mostly in the paradigm of sport and expression of performance traits, but people train for quote unquote life. So what does life, performing in life look like? It's like having fulfilling moments with your family, being in positive mood and things like that, enjoying yourself, I guess. Do you really need TRT?
I think that there's definitely a feeling of virility associated with, eating a high protein diet, getting 8 hours of sleep, lifting heavy weights, drinking enough water, not absolutely butchering your hormones with fucking 4 nights of heavy drinking, doing all the little things, making sure you're eating, Roy G. Biv for a variety of stuff, being tested so that, and I'll tell you this, man, the one that ends up fixing a lot of this stuff, and you've seen this, Luke, in your own stuff.
Oh yeah.
Is you go in and all of a sudden you have this low level inflammation or you have this gut inflammation.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah. Where did I get this gut parasite? Where did this come from? And instead of addressing this, I don't want to have some low level gut parasite that ends up causing, stomach cancer. Instead of being well, your testosterone's low, so let me just give you a shot, opposed from fixing some of this base level stuff.
Right.
And I really think that's where Cosenta and Tom are so far ahead of the curve. And I've recommended people go to Tom for almost a decade plus. You guys have known my relationship with him, because he's one of the only people that I've met that has the volume of testing and the experience to work through just about any situation. And through that, you can be able to put together some things that are hey, this is something I'm dealing with. could this be a deciding factor? And then when we can fix all that stuff, then we can actually get some honest to goodness information back into testing and then make an informed decision. If what you're effectively doing is you're throwing a Band-Aid on top of a bigger issue,
Right.
then the issue never resolves and we just have to keep, reapplying Band-Aids.
And my experience with Tom, and like I've been fortunate enough to get to know him personally, through you, John, and him being a friend of Power Athlete, is I've never really heard him trash talk much. You know what I mean? Where it's like, well, we need more information to know. Mm-hmm. Like, we just need more information to know. With the exception of, like, I would say he is not a fan of like modern cancer treatment, right? Just go in and nuke everything.
Yeah.
But even then he'll say, well, that maybe, like there might be someone where that's the way we got to go. But we don't know because everything is so hyper individualized genetically, and he's part of that cohort of collecting all the genetic varieties of these diseases and shit like that, and treating, like, grouping things that way instead of like locally. That was what was cool for me. He's like, just because cancer is metastasized, is that the right? Metastasized in the breast doesn't mean it's unique to the breast. Like, no breast cancer is genetically the equivalent, and they all respond differently to certain therapies. So, just to know that, and I remember asking him, like, is that for real? He's like, oh yeah, everybody knows this. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, and to pull back on the testosterone thing, I think there's some also really interesting stuff with peptides. And my recommendation is don't go on the internet and fucking buy some research grade peptides from some weird pharmacy. Like, just don't do it. Like, there's actually FDA pharmacies and there's doctors that actually do some prescription of that stuff. Be smart. Like, and the other one too is I think, like the age old, like, and I hate to use the term conscientious objector because that's associated with people that didn't think they should fight in Vietnam. But like the idea of being like an educated consumer with a slight hint of like skepticism. Yeah. So that when the doctor, and here's another issue, they don't teach hormone replacement in med school. Like, they don't teach nutrition. It's a one-day deal in there. So I always get nervous when doctors start talking too much about nutrition. And especially with this hormone stuff, they have like a weekend seminar that's put on. These guys go and learn for, 16 hours. And next thing you know, they have, their family gets a trip to Hawaii for all these different prescriptions that they can write for this various pharmacy or for this certain drug.
Yeah, treatment.
Yeah, for this. So I'm not ruling it out. I just said that there is a road to get there that doesn't look like just here's the script, go to the doc, I have low T, and getting a shot.
And it's also possible too, like, let's say you just got this blood work, right? There's this sense of urgency to probably take action, but you've probably been operating off of this for years. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So like, don't feel that there's a sensation, like the sensation to rush and get to an answer today has got to be like overwhelming, but like do the groundwork, right? And slow the roll, get the micronutrient panel done. Make sure you're in get the sleep study done. Make sure you're carrying a low level of body fat, 15%.
Yeah. I mean, I would not highly recommend somebody going on some hormone replacement that's, in the 20s or the 30%. If your body fat is really high, you're going to have a hell of a deal with that aromatization, because what's crazy is they will write a script for testosterone like it's nothing. But the minute that you're like, hey, what about something to kind of blunt, or maybe like something like a Arimidex or Aromacin or something that ends up blunting or killing off estrogen, all of a sudden now they've entered a completely different realm, because now those are female drugs or those are cancer drugs that they're, and that's outside the scope of what they've been taught in their weekend seminar. Mm. So they all hand you a script for testosterone, but yet they don't understand that sometimes if that stuff aromatizes, or when they get your blood work and the testosterone is high and the estrogen's high, how you the steps in place to basically blunt and retard the estrogen levels, that's a little outside their kind of like wizardry. So you gotta be, you gotta find a doctor who's sharp with that stuff. I mean, Doc Parsley, who is, not only, has worked in private practice, but was a SEAL doc for 2 decades, who has more information about hormones as it relates to sleep and diet and, this and that, working in that special population, has been a wealth of information for it. But there's a lot of different levers. You just have to find a doctor that's fucking well schooled in this type of
or
art.
Has like a partner, or possibly a respected functional medicine doc that they collaborate with to help like kind of bridge the gap there in the shit they're not formally taught.
Well, the other one, and everybody like wants to talk to who is it? The people that do endocrinologists. So the endocrinologists, they measure hormones and this, and everybody's like, oh, I need to go to an endocrinologist. Endocrinologists are taught to look for pathology. So all of a sudden they see you have high testosterone levels. Oh, you must have a tumor. So they're looking for if this, then that. They're not necessarily into this deal of like hormone optimization, which is a really new piece. Mm-hmm. And there's these different kind of hormone clinics that pop up like Total Men, and you go in there and there's a doc there, you get your blood work, writes you a deal, and, pushes you on the way. And I think those places make a ton of money because, who doesn't want more testosterone? Mm-hmm. But I really tell people like, hey, let's take it slow. You always have that as the option. Let's figure out if we can ratchet up all those other things. Because if we ratchet this and we fix these other issues, if you go to that, this will be much more advantageous.
Mm-hmm. Did you have something, Tex?
I mean, is it a simple test is finding a doctor that lifts weights and understands the body's response to health, fitness?
How many doctors have we met that lift weights well?
Medical doctors?
Yeah. Tom, Kirk. I mean,
Doc Parsley.
Yeah.
What? Parsley's first off fine, but I don't think he's like a
great
Navy SEAL
exerciser.
For a Navy
good point.
SEAL, former Navy SEAL. Those guys are
squats.
Just kidding, my SEAL friends.
He had a pretty legit total in powerlifting.
Yeah, I guess he
squats well for
and he has
SEAL.
one nice pair of calves. I'll tell you that much.
Fucking
me and Parsley.
They
just
look like a snake that swallowed a rabbit.
What's Katy, Texas? It's just the way.
I mean. The amount of doctors that I've met,
with you.
Dr. Tom is one. I mean, we've met certain doctors that were, pretty fit, like to train and knew how to bang weights and understand the kind of the physiology associated with it. I will say that it's fewer and far between.
Isn't this like
Calvo? He didn't know shit about lifting weights.
Mm-hmm. What about didn't Rob have a network? But that was like paleo
practitioners.
I guess that would get you closer to medical doctors who are. If they're tolerant of nutritional intervention, might be privy to some of the micronutrient components to this.
That high-level micronutrient testing, like what Dr. Tom does, is pretty next-level type of stuff. I mean, that like your local, doc sheriff who's down in the strip mall who's writing testosterone prescriptions doesn't even know that stuff exists because he doesn't have to. He just... Dudes coming with low T. I test them. They got low T, and you know what I do? I write them a script, and next thing I know, and that's the deal. Whereas I look at Dr. Tom's approach, and very similar to Power Athlete in that way. I mean, there's a reason why we've been friends as long and we work together. Is there's a holistic approach. It's just not if this then that. Mm-hmm. And I think by taking that holistic approach, I mean, looking at like not only sleep, like what is sleep dialed? What is testing? Are we looking at like how much testing? What tests were done? What does the training look like? What is all these other key factors? And I think when we can take a look and we can look at, let's say we get all this information, we put it up on a big whiteboard, you can start drawing conclusions that I think the average doc who just wants to write a script isn't going to do because it's too much effort associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's also encouragement for the individual, the 40-plus-year-old, to find that practitioner, the specialist, the doctor. Because not all doctors are created equal, just as not all coaches. And
well, the other one is, what did their testosterone look like in their 20s and 30s? So what if your test,
well, they don't know.
Well, yeah, because they don't have the testing. So all of a sudden, the doctor tests you, and based off of his test, your number is low. Well, what's he testing? Is it free? Is it total? What does this look like? What are all these other key factors? I mean, you got to remember that like nothing exists in a vacuum. So all of these things are interdependent. What is the hormone? What is your thyroid? What does your cortisol look like? What is this? What is this? What is the liver function? I mean, all these things are compounding factors associated with it. It's just not like you got low T and that's the only thing wrong. Why?
Well, the Thorne Perform Bio that captured our hormones. Mm-hmm. So even if you're a 30-something right now and you want to have a reference 10 years down the line,
affordable at-home
test solution could be the Thorne Perform Bio.
And there's other outfits that are kind of in that space. We know these companies and we use them and we trust them and like we aren't incentivized in any way.
It's easy and it's on your time. Like literally drop it in the mail and
yeah. So
as an option, but
I think asked and answered. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So I guess if you guys have I sense there will be questions on this.
Well, we've given you a ton of free information. If you want to sign up for a consult, just go to johnwelbourn.com or reach out through Power Athlete. We can set up a consult.
Power Athlete contact form or johnwelbourn.com contact form.
Which also goes to Talk to Me, Johnny.
And we'll link up the article, the previous article as well, in the show notes.
All right.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, Power Athlete Nation, now what do you feel like doing?
Watching Vision Quest.
Okay.
Again.
Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening to another episode of Power Athlete Radio, the premier podcast in strength and conditioning. Leave us a voicemail if you've got a question. 929-464-4640. That's 929-0. Until next time.
Now it's time for you to empower your performance. Head to powerathletehq.com/training to choose from a number of programs to meet your specific performance goals. And if you like to break a mental sweat too, visit academy.powerathletehq.com and become a real stakeholder in you or your athlete's success. Until next time, bye!